Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our October 2019 Teaching and Learning for Student Success monthly webinar. Thank you for joining us today for what promises to be an exciting talk with Frank Savina of the UT Dana Center on dismantling barriers, opening math pathways that empower our students. Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Frank Savina. Frank Savina has a Master of Arts in Teaching and a Bachelor of Science, both in mathematics, from the University of Texas at El Paso. He leads the design, development, and implementation of the Pathway to Calculus for the Dana Center Mathematics Pathways, formerly the New Mathways Project, an initiative to modernize entry-level college math programs through working with states, universities, and colleges. He presents findings at national and regional conferences of professional mathematics organizations to inform the mathematics community about best practices in teaching gateway math students. Frank has 20 years of teaching experience at the university and high school levels. In addition to serving for 5 years as mathematics professor at El Paso Community College, he was an adjunct math faculty member and director of the Educational Talent Search Program at the University of Texas at El Paso. Most notably, Frank was the first mathematics department chair for the first early college in El Paso, where he was selected as Teacher of the Year. Mission Early College High School, a collaboration between Socorro Independent School District, El Paso Community College, and the University of Texas at El Paso, went on to become a national blue ribbon school during his tenure. And without further ado, it is my great pleasure to turn it over to Mr. Frank Savina.
Thank you, Lydia. I really appreciate that. I'm really happy to be here, and I hope you can see my screen at this point. I just turned on my camera, my screen, and hopefully you can hear me. Just a quick test of some of the features we have here. I just want to get a sense for my room. Who's in the room? Do I have people that are mathematicians? Do I have teachers? Do I have administrators, advisors? If you'll take a moment to just type that in the chat, just so I can get a sense who's here.
We have Ann Fletcher, who's an English teacher with us from Austin, Texas.
We got English in the house. I'm good with that. Anybody else?
We have Rachel Ruiz, who's the Dean of Student Affairs, also here at Austin Community College.
Perfect. ACC is one of my favorite institutions in the whole wide world.
Anne says, yeah, go ACC. We have Beverly Hickson, who is an education teacher from Houston Community College.
Great.
And let's see, and we have Deborah Macbeth, who is our Director of Communications and Engagement for Catch the Next. And we have a couple of other people, including myself. You know about my love of math.
I do know.
So yeah, go right ahead.
Feel free. Just one quick question for you. I can't see the chat answers there, but so I'll just count on you to kind of share those with me. I'll ask some questions in a little while, but I designed this talk to kind of be informal. So at some points I'll ask you some questions, and hopefully you'll take some time to type into the chat feature. What I wanted to do today is just kind of talk about my perspective on math teaching on where I currently work, which is at the UT Dana Center. So I get to spend a lot of time thinking about, systems and thinking about the classroom as well. So I have to think about mathematics across levels. But a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is kind of my perspectives on a long career in teaching. So one of the things I'm proudest of in terms of my career in particular is I've taught at every single level. I've spent years teaching middle school. I've spent years teaching high school. I spent years teaching early college, and I've been a full-time instructor at a community college. I've been an adjunct professor at an R1 institution at UTEP, and now I'm at UT Austin. And so I've done a lot of teaching at a lot of different levels. And I wanted to do was just share some perspectives on how myself at the Dana Center and probably a lot of my colleagues, how we think about mathematics and mathematics education in general. And hopefully when you walk away from today, you can get a sense for some of the barriers that are out there and how we right, as empowered individuals can begin to dismantle those simply by shifting the way we think about math, right? So I will share all those things with you today, but I wanted to start off with just one simple question for all of you. And I'm actually glad that not everybody here is math. I am kind of sad that some of you are not mathematics, so I need them to hear this, but I want to start off with this really easy question for you. I want to just take a few moments to think and just describe what comes to your mind when you think about your math experience throughout high school. Just think about that. And when you're ready, just drop it in the chat.
Okay, we have a couple of comments here. Beverly says unpleasant.
Yeah. Okay.
Gail Malone says, my teachers were coaches who did not understand math and did not teach math.
Oh, okay. That is certainly a problem out there.
I definitely had that experience as well. Deborah says, loved geometry, not algebra though.
I'm going to get back to that in just a little bit. I love that comment.
Anne says, I struggled with math most of my life. It was only when I taught with a regular great teacher that I really learned it.
Awesome.
And for me, I think I would sum it up by I always enjoyed math, but it was always about getting the right answer.
That's a great point. I think I'm in your camp, Lydia. I feel like, unfortunately, when I look back to my education, I think at times I was too much of a rule follower. Following rules came easy for me, and so math was kind of a place where I could escape to just rule following sometimes. And it wasn't until later that I started to realize that there's a lot more to math, and there's a lot of discovery and a lot of gray area that sometimes my teachers didn't always share about. So the reason why I shared that with you all, or I asked you that question, was to kind of start to get you to think about, the first comment that came up, which was just simply unpleasant, right? There's lots of things that pose barriers for our students. Some of them have unpleasant situations for whatever reasons. Some of them had just a teacher they didn't connect with, or maybe a teacher that didn't want to be there, in the case of coaches, et cetera, that may not want to teach. And so what I wanted to do is kind of start to think about, why is it that it's common for a lot of us to have an unpleasant experience in our math education? And I thought I would start by picking up on some of the myths that are out there and take you on a journey of what I see as a big barrier to our students. And so I wanted to share a couple of just common myths that are out there. And the first one is this one right here, right? It's this idea that only some people are good at math. And that's just simply not true. I hold degrees in advanced math. Hearing this frustrates me because I want people to know something about me. I work hard. That's who I am. I want to be valued for bringing value to an organization, for putting my heart into it. And that's one of the things that made me successful in mathematics. I need to be honest with everyone here. I spent most of my math career confused. Like, I had to figure things out, right? And so that's why I'm good at mathematics, is I was willing to stay in that confusion, persevere through it, work hard, ask questions, ask others, and to be perfectly honest with you, seek help. Right? Those are the kinds of skills that I have that make me successful at math. And so I want to share that with you to give you permission to please never, ever, ever tell your students, I'm just not a math person, or you're a math person and I'm not. Those kinds of things. And I'll get back to why that's why that poses such a big barrier for us as we move forward. Here's another one, right? It's this idea that only algebra is rigorous. I heard someone say at the beginning, hey, geometry, right? This idea of I like geometry. Me too, I love geometry. Geometry offered all kinds of ways for me to experience mathematics in a way that wasn't necessarily procedural, right? There were explorations to be had with the way shapes are, or even if you had a teacher that took you into proofs. There was lots of good mathematics there. And having been in high school, I taught all levels high school, from algebra through calculus. There are lots of rigorous courses that are not algebra, starting with statistics, starting with quantitative reasoning. And those ideas transition into the idea of those gateway level math courses that we always talk about. So I want you to think about this as a myth that we carry. And then finally, the most dangerous one of all. I alluded to the idea of stats and quantitative reasoning just a second ago. But we carry with us, a lot of us carry this idea that statistics and quantitative reasoning are for those other students, right? The students that couldn't do well in STEM. We created a special course for you all. It's called quantitative reasoning. And what I'm here to share with you all is that's just simply not where the math field is going. There's great work going on out there in terms of the idea of developing really rigorous and really amazing and outstanding quantitative reasoning courses. And of course, I taught statistics as well. So stats is just an amazing discipline that can be really rigorous, the kinds of questions that you pose when you start to think about all the things that go into statistics, when we make inferences and we look at charts and talk about data. And so these are some of the common myths that are out there, right? Just everyday people. But my colleagues also hold some beliefs that can be troubling at times, right? And I want to share some of those with you. The first is this idea. It's a simple idea that my textbook is my curriculum. That's just problematic all around as a mathematician. This one really bothers me to my core because we develop curriculum. Right? We've outsourced that work to textbook developers. And in that disconnect, we've lost something there. We've given away our power as faculty to develop the math that our students need to learn. So that's first and foremost is I always advocate that we as teachers in general, this is not even math teachers, but just teaching in general, that we take back that power and take over the curricula that we teach. Right? And that involves more work. It involves development of curriculum, which a lot of times we don't have time for, but we need to start to think more carefully about how we can come together to do that work. Really closely aligned with that is this idea here, which is very problematic in college. When I taught college, my colleagues always said things like this, right? I need to cover everything, therefore I have to lecture. That's very connected to the first point that I'm making here, right? There's this book, there's this almost like a Bible, like you have to cover everything here, when in reality, there are learning outcomes we're trying to achieve. And so if we take back the power to develop curriculum, if we take back the power to develop activities for students and start to really think about what we're doing in the classroom, we can start to open up space and time for real mathematics to happen through active and collaborative learning. Right? So these are some of the beliefs that are out there that I just want to talk about a little bit and continue to kind of share with you how these begin to create barriers for our students that we need to dismantle. Here's one that really bothers me to my core as well, right? I'm a content expert. This happened to me especially at the community college. I spent a lot of years teaching at the community college. And my colleagues always said to me, that's just not my job. I'm a content expert, not a teacher. And I'm like, it always confused me because I was like, I thought about it differently. I get paid to be here to teach. So my job is a teacher. And therefore, I need to learn to be a better teacher. Yes, I am a content expert. Yes, I studied mathematics. But by being here, that's the beauty of this profession is I get to learn to be better at it. And I need to pair up with others to help me be better at my craft. There's lots of faculty that are willing to work together to develop their craft, to take on that training, to learn how to do active learning activities, to learn how to do collaborative learning, to learn how to have discourse in math class, right? All of these things are important. So what I'm trying to take you on, give you a picture of here is we probably would agree that we have a mixed bag of reactions to the people's math experiences in mathematics, that there are a lot of myths that are out there that I just shared with you. And the reason I shared with you these myths is because they contribute to one really huge barrier for us. And that, oh, I forgot one. I'll get back to this one, procedural fluency, in a second, but it's the idea of math as pedigree, right? The idea that if I take calculus 367 and I get all A's, I am now ready for Harvard. I am now ready for Stanford. That is math as pedigree. And it forgets the other idea of doing mathematics simply because it can be great. It can be useful. I can enjoy it. It's beneficial to me. It helps me in my career. It helps me in my life, right? So I just want to make sure that you see that connection to these myths that we have about mathematics are contributing to this bigger idea that poses a huge, huge, huge barrier for our students. Let me back up a little bit. I forgot that one, which was procedural fluency here. And it's this idea that we do procedures in math class. That was kind of the distinction if you think about that comment that was made earlier about geometry and algebra. In algebra, there was a lot of procedure. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way, but unfortunately, it tends to go that way. And one of the things I would have shared here to any of my attendees that are mathematicians or math professors, it's not that procedural fluency is not important. It's that when we think about application to bring meaning to math class, and we think about teaching conceptual understanding, we're actually opening the door for procedural fluency, which is very important for students and as they move on in their math courses. So that's one more myth that's out there. All of these contribute to this idea of math as pedigree. And I want to stop here for just a second, and I want to put to myself. Okay, I'm gonna share a quote with you, and as you read this quote, I want you to look in your camera, look at this guy. I'm a Hispanic male that was born in Segundo Barrio El Paso. Okay, and I want you to hold on to that thought for just a second as you read this quote. And I will let that speak for itself, right? As you think about the students that look like me, as underrepresented minorities that are starting their math journeys and have to face really tough situations in their math classes. I want to bring you back to that idea of procedural fluency for just a moment. Still stay with that person that's in your camera right now, that Hispanic male that was born in Segundo Barrio. And think about this comment or this quote for just a moment. And I'll follow it up with one more quote. And so I just want to point to some of the things that are kind of popping out here. Procedures are in there, rules are in there, right? And the idea of compounding the problem for marginalized students in our educational system. And so that was this kind of the beginning part of my talk today is we have to change that. And it begins with us, right? So I do want to, I gave you these quotes and you're probably bummed out right now and you're thinking like, why am I here? But really, I'm here to kind of shift your thinking a little bit. So the question then becomes for us is, what do we do as educators, right? And there's some basic things that we can do, right? We have to shift our thinking. We have to be the starters of it. We have to shift the way we think. We have to believe a few things. And the first one of those is this, right? If I work at it, if I change strategies when I get stuck, if I work with others, and I understand that struggle is part of the process, then I can learn math. It's just that simple. And I can't emphasize that part enough based on just my experience. Don't give us math people power anymore. There's no point in that. We are normal human beings that struggle with math just like everyone else. The second is a wide variety of math courses are rigorous. I often think about my students, my own kids here, right? And I don't want anyone, Matthew and Anna, those are my kids. I will share that I never teach them math. And my wife gets really upset about that. She's like, math, you should be teaching them. I said, no, I teach mindset. They will figure out what they want. And with that as a backdrop, right, the last thing I want for my kids is for them to start their career, go to statistics because they decided to be a nurse or they decided to be something else that doesn't require college algebra. And for someone to say, your math is less, that would just frustrate me for my own students. And so I want you to think about those things. And finally, as teachers, right, we have to believe that students that construct meaning through active and collaborative learning retain information in follow-up courses. We have to move away from just one mode of teaching in mathematics and really help our students construct meaning. That's how they carry it through. That's how they utilize it, when they move on in their lives and are actually looking at data sets and reading journals that can change their perspectives and, might influence how they vote, right? We want them to be informed in mathematics. And if we do it well, if we construct their meaning rather than just lecture to them, we can get them to a point where they retain some of the math that's so important for them in their lives. So that's just us personally. But there are also structures that we can start to think about. So as you're in the education field, as you're out there and you're working with your colleagues, think about systemic structures, right? So it begins with us. We have to have beliefs about mathematics, and we have to change those myths. We have to challenge those myths, and we have to remove math as pedigree. And then we have to kind of shift a little and start to think about the systemic structures that are in place that uphold math as pedigree in a sense. Right? So some of the systemic structures that can help us overcome this idea is simply to start off with this simple idea. Just offer diversified math pathways. Right? If faculty in a university are working together to connect the mathematics that students are asked to take, that brings meaning to those courses. And by bringing meaning, we increase success. They're doing it because they know why. They have a reason to do it. And so that's really at the core of mathematics pathways, is make the mathematics relevant. And that takes a lot of work from math faculty. I realize this, right? They have to work with other disciplines. They have to ask questions of the other disciplines. What do you need in mathematics? What kind of mathematics do you need as a criminal justice major? What kind of mathematics do you need as a nurse? Those are very critical questions, right? And those are systemic structures that we can work on to start to remove barriers for our students. The other is to establish default math requirements for each program of study. Right? Have the courage to say, we as math faculty and the nursing program have had a long conversation about this. Statistics is good for our nurses. This is the course that you need. Rather than saying any course, right? Or having a lot of ors in the catalog, where students will simply often revert to those myths and say, well, I'll just take college algebra because it's safe. I might transfer, those kinds of things. So if you're offering math pathways, start to have conversations and have the courage to say, this is the appropriate math course. Here's another one. And this is the idea of de-emphasizing math placement tests. I won't say too much here other than remember what Pam Burden said a little while ago, right? We have an overemphasis on tests. And so I'm not saying, right, don't place your students. What I'm saying is there are lots of other things that we can look at to help us determine if students are prepared for math courses in college. Chief among them, or top among them, is high school GPA, right? So having a couple of systems in place that let you kind of assess students better, not just the one single placement test at the very beginning. And then finally, something that Texas is doing a lot of work in, right? The idea of corequisite courses for students who still need support. So there's lots of things we can do, and lots of things we're already doing. And so these are the things that I want you to hopefully take back to your own homes. If you have kids and you change the way you talk about math with your kids. As I'm thinking about a story I share with my students, and thinking about that previous slide that I just had a little while ago, this idea of struggle is so critical. And I was very careful with my own kids about it. The first time they came home and I asked, how did you do in school? They said, great, right? And my reaction was opposite of that. My reaction was like, I'm so sorry, you didn't learn, right? And they were like caught off guard. Like, so what I was telling them directly was, you're supposed to be struggling to be learning. And now they've really bought into that idea. They hate it when I talk too much. Like, you're lecturing to me, let me construct meaning. So those are things that I really value in our household. And I hope that based on some of the things I've shared today, you take back to your own students and your own kids. It also takes us kind of changing the conversation around math just a little bit. Right? I think this is where the conversation is so critical with advisors. If you're doing math pathways math pathways at your institution and you're doing it well, then you have to have that initial conversation that should not revolve around mathematics. Please, please, please never say, I'm advising you to do this because you're not good at math, right? That would be terrible. So the conversation starts with having a conversation, pre-major advising, if you will. If you look at the very top of this, there's kind of a bar that goes across at the very top that talks about advise and assess. Really, the idea then is to help students choose a broad meta major, the humanities, for example, because we understand that students will change. But most often they change within these meta majors. They very rarely change from humanities to STEM, right? And so the purpose of that is to help to let students know that the math choice they're about to make will matter. It won't change later. So once you have students Having decided on a meta major, then you have a conversation about this is the math required for you. And only until you reach that point do you really ask, hey, are you ready for this math course? And if not, have the structures in place to do that. Have those core requisite support courses to help them get through their college level course. And then after that, as we all know, students start off undecided. At some point later, they'll choose their major, and then we move on from there. The beauty of this is math shouldn't be a factor in what they choose. Bottom line. So I'm giving you kind of 3 areas to think about, right? Your own changes that you got to make internally against those myths and against the idea of math as pedigree, the structures that are out there that you can support and really know to talk about with your colleagues. And then finally, working with advisors to make sure appropriate conversations are happening. I want to share with you just, one of the coolest things about working at the Data Center is I get to see lots of data. I've seen lots of Tennessee data. I've seen all kinds of data everywhere in terms of CUNY, in terms of core requisites. But I want to share something that I just got like last week from California because they're doing core requisites as well. And I want to just give you a sense for the kinds of changes that can come from just structural changes, the kinds of success rates that can come from just changing structures. Right? So I'm going to give you a moment to kind of take in this slide. Just kind of look at it, take it in, and then I'll start talking in just a little bit. I'm letting you construct your own meaning right now, like a good math teacher. So I'm going to give you some think time and just take this slide in. Okay, so I'll start talking about this just a little bit. California has moved to core recs, right? And so what you see on this chart is it's broken up by GPA. There are 3 different buckets to look at. There's GPA below 2.3. There's GPA between 2.3 and 3.0. And then there's GPA greater than 3.0 or greater than 2.3 and C or better in calc. So you can fit in that upper bucket if you either have a 3.0 in high school or above, or you have a 2.3 or above and you happen to get a C or better in pre-calculus. Okay, so that kind of gives you a sense for 3 different kinds of students, right, that have done different things in their high school careers. I want to focus on the bottom end of that. I want to look at students that have lower GPAs below 2.3. And if you focus there for just a minute, there's 3 bars. There's a very low bar that says 8%, that's kind of low orange. There's a middle bar at 29%, which is kind of middle orange. And then there's the kind of reddish orange, which is 45%. And what that's telling you is in this bucket of students, this group of students that happen to get below a 2.3, if we give them one remedial math class, only 8% of those students, this is statewide data, only 8% of those students will go on to finish their college level math. Right? If, however, you look at those students again and just look at the ones that happen to place into their college level course, success is only 29% for those students. So that's just statewide data. When you look at the red orange, which is the 45%, that's data from the colleges that have utilized core requisites in the last year. And students that were at below 2.3% GPA, I'm sorry, 2.3 GPA, that were placed directly into their math class with core requisite support are succeeding at a 45% rate, which way outdoes the other 2. That's just at the bottom end of the GPA spectrum. But that pattern repeats across GPAs. And this is for statistics. If we I can also share with you the same thing in college algebra. The only thing, this one has less colleges teaching college algebra with this model. There's only 1 college doing that. The other one had 5 colleges doing that across the state. But you see the same pattern. Right? Corrects help students. It's just pretty basic. And this is on top of already mounting evidence in Tennessee and Georgia, in Texas, right? Hopefully we'll get some great data here as well. And so that's some data I just recently got that I thought, I'm just gonna throw out there for them, let them see it. This has to do with structural changes that help our students. So one thing I'll say before I close here is you can do lots of things and you should do them in concert, right? Think about math pathways, which is at the top of this diagram. Think about core requisites. Rethink that placement testing. Have appropriate conversations in advising, and think about creating your meta majors. All of those things put together just help student success. Okay. And with that, I will just open it up to you all. Right? Do you have any questions for me, or is there anything you want to add to this conversation? I took a very personal approach with this today because I'm at a data center. I left teaching. I love teaching. I just got to be honest. It's the best job in the world. And I left that to learn about how to teach and how to train teachers and work with professors at the curriculum level. And I wanted to share some of my perspectives that go into stuff that I develop, right? I get to write math courses. I get to dream about the classroom. And this is some of what's in my head and my colleagues' heads at the data center when we're working on curriculum is we're trying to dismantle those barriers through pedagogy and curriculum. So with that, I will pass it over to questions. Please feel free to turn on your audio. That might be better. I totally do not mind if you ask me a question directly, but if you prefer to type it in the chat, that's fine as well.
And if you do have audio access or you've joined from your phone, so if you have a microphone in your computer or if you've joined from your phone, you can just use the hand raise feature, the little icon of a hand there, and I will unmute you so that you can speak to Frank directly. While we are waiting on folks to think of a few questions, someone joined us a little bit later, and I wanted to share with you her comment about kind of her perception of math. She says, this is Lillian Huerta, who's also here at Austin Community College. She says, she says, my idea when I was very young, of course, was that students who were successful in math were only the quote unquote smart students. They were the honor roll and successful students, and the rest of us were the at-risk, etc. There was such a stigma for those of us in the intro math classes, which increased our insecurity.
Those are great points. And I wish you could have read that out a little bit earlier, because I think it connects to a lot to what I'm saying about the danger of us belittling other math courses, believing that college algebra is it. Often I think about it, and I've seen statewide data on who gets to go to algebra in 8th grade, for example. It's a very select few kids, and it's very troubling to me to think about those things. Those are great points.
And again, feel free to type in any questions that you have or use the hand raise feature. So I wanted to ask you a quick question, Frank. Since we have mostly, non-math faculty on the line with us, what advice or suggestions can you offer for how we might be able to incorporate math confidence into our English classes or into our humanities classes or into our learning frameworks classes? So, I mean, the title of your talk is Dismantling Barriers, and one of the barriers I think about is, kind of the barriers between disciplines. So is there a way that we can break down that barrier to kind of build up, like, there was this movement before for writing across the curriculum. Is there a way we could do, math across the curriculum or something like that to incorporate it sort of across disciplines?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lydia. And I think the answer I'll offer is this. One of the things I get to do a lot of is work with different math faculty and partner disciplines, right, across the country. Right now I'm working with the University of North Carolina system, and our job with the North Carolina system is to work with 3 different institutions to help them bring the math conversation to their partner disciplines. One of those institutions wants to bring the conversation to the English department, right? So this is math saying, I want to bring a conversation to you all so we can make a decision on A, what is the best math course for your students? And B, what would you like the course to look like? In having the conversations with this institution, we kind of figured out real quickly that their English faculty have kind of outsourced that power or that idea of the connection to the math department and said, we don't really care. Whatever math you give us, we don't use it, no big deal, right? Which is terrible. It's a terrible approach. And so to your question, my offering to you is you have to reach out to the math department and not just simply say, we'll take whatever math course you offer us. You have to enter into a conversation with disciplines. So math and English should work together so that you have conversations about what's taught in the math classes that they offer and have an opportunity to say, tell me more about this particular thing you do. I have an idea about how I can incorporate this into my English class. Do you think that that would work? So otherwise, we stand by ourselves as English faculty and we say, well, that's just not my area of expertise, and that's very difficult. And so that's my answer, and that's what I offer is, don't be scared as English faculty to bring that conversation to your math department, and don't be scared to challenge whatever course they want to offer your students. Make sure you do that deliberately and you talk about it.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
So we have a couple of comments here and a question from Lillian Huerta who says, hi, Frank, awesome as always. What structural barriers have you found as you try to implement these changes?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest, the hardest parts has been the idea of aligning the math courses. I don't know what it is about that part of it, the alignment piece. Often what I see is people will say, or institutions will say, we offer math pathways. And technically that's true. They offer different math courses. But what I'm seeing a lot of is when we dig into the data of that institution, what we see is that the vast majority of students are in college algebra. And so on the face of it, a lot of institutions are technically offering a variety of math pathways. But there's something behind the scenes that's still funneling students to one math course, right? And so that's where I think the really critical part of all of this work is to really align courses by collaborating internally to really be courageous enough to say, this is the math course that our students need for criminal justice, for example, rather than just simply saying, you can take this or this or this. Okay. If you change that language and you have the courage to do it, then you'll start to see your data be more spread out. You'll have more students in statistics. You'll have more students in quantitative reasoning. You'll have a proportional number of students in STEM. And that's critical. So, and that happens here in El Paso. Like my wife works at UTEP. I'm going to totally put her on the spot. And I always ask her that, right? How many students do you have in college algebra? Does it match? And she's like, I'm not going to say anything because, I don't want to tell you. I said, okay, fair enough. But I suspect lots of stuff. I hope that answered your question, Lillian. That's the biggest barrier I see.
Yeah, definitely. And Ann Fletcher says, I don't really have a question, but most of what you have said is applicable to the other disciplines, including English. It's important to create the curriculum and realize we don't have to cover everything and implement more active, and then also to implement more active and collaborative learning.
Totally agree with that comment. And I say that as what I consider to be an English person. I consider myself as an English person. I have, English was not my first language, but when I got to university, I got my A in technical writing in my senior level program. Right? It was a senior level technical writing class, and getting an A in that class was affirming to me, like I can write. And then later on, when I came to the data center, well, I have to write a lot, and my editors have always commented like, and they carry the myth as well. They're like, hey, for a math guy, you write pretty well. I said, please, I'm good at everything. Stop. I'm good at many, many things. But I totally agree with that. Yes.
Yeah, that's so interesting too. Anne's comment reminds me of, I remember in one of my first years teaching at the community college, I had a student who, in her final portfolio presentation, um, had expressed to me that she uh, was terrified of English and terrified of writing, and that she actually, but that she is more of a math person, quote unquote, and that she actually liked the way I taught writing because not that it was formulaic, but it was in, she was able to put it into a structure that it was like a formula that she could understand, where she could just, replace variables with her own language and things like that, to where she could play with it, play with writing in the same way she had learned how to play with math.
Very, very interesting. Yeah, I connected that because I was a sentence diagrammer in middle school. I don't know if you
I was
all
the
went through
same.
that. You were the
Yes.
same thing, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And some of my structures for my sentences are usually pretty decent,
Hmm. Hmm.
but I connected that.
Well, thank you so much. We have a big thank you from Lillian and Anne and Beverly and Deborah, who are still online with us. Thank you for sharing your time and your expertise with us, Frank. Hopefully, we'll be able to incorporate some of these changes and keep fighting the good fight.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me, everybody, and I appreciate you listening to me today. I really appreciate it. I will just leave you with this. If you ever want to reach out and you have any questions, there's my email address. Um, I don't know if it's being shown right now, but you
Yeah,
can find
yeah.
me. Yep. You can find me at the data center, and I'm happy to continue the conversation or answer any questions you need, or if you need resources, I can point you in the right direction.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Frank. And
Thank you very
thank you
much.
all for donating part of your afternoon to us. We will see you next month for the Teaching and Learning for Student Success Monthly webinar series. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Have a good afternoon.